All right, we're live, I guess. This is episode two of Meet the Napa breeder, Eric Borkowski, Point North Gundogs, way up in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
How are
Yeah,
you
where it's
doing?
out where it's always cold, except for right now where it's been 90 and 92 and 93 for the last 3 or 4 days, and everything else we can't get anything done during the day. So
I bet your weather's a lot like mine in
yeah,
central New
it's
York. Freezing
yeah,
cold in
it's
the winter and blistering hot in the summer. And you,
absolutely
and you have two seasons because fall is 2 weeks and
right.
spring is 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to travel to enjoy fall.
So introduce yourself, Point North Gundogs.
Yep. Eric Borkoski, up here, like you said, just a little bit northwest of Minneapolis. We're kind of right on the edge of where things start to get real woodsy. For us, we where we live, we're kind of in the middle of the 30, 40 foot pine trees. We're just about to get to the northern part of Minnesota. So we get kind of everything. If we drive 10, 15 minutes south, we can get to pretty much anything we need as far as grocery stores, department stores, that sort of thing. But if we go a little bit further north, we feel like we're kind of up in the woods a little bit. I can be in a parking lot to get out of the truck and hunt woodcock and rough grouse in about 6.5 minutes from the driveway. So not so bad.
No, that's not so bad at all. I
Yeah.
guess the question is how many minutes before you have a limit?
That all depends on which direction I go.
You're
If I
supposed to say
pick the
there's no
right
there's no
trail,
grouse or woodcock in Minnesota. I thought that's what you
yeah,
were telling me.
well, they're okay, and it's one of those things. I kind of feel sometimes I tell people when they come from down south to come up and hunt or something. I tell them it's a little bit like I say like fly fishermen or musky fishermen, where sometimes it's just how many you hear or you see going away from you. You don't always get to shoot at them. So, but usually you're gonna get to hear a few or see a couple just out of the corner of your eye. So
On a side note, I just realized this. I'm titled as Jason Mix on this
yep,
video,
you are.
so so I could say all sorts of outlandish, outrageous things. You'll get
And
the
I'll
hate
believe
mail.
you. And I'll believe you because I think it's Jason, right? I'm
Jason,
used to
I'm
that.
sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry. I am not Jason Mix. I'm Daniel Kremers. So
There you go.
so I'm looking at the photos behind you. It looks like this whole dog thing is a whole family
Yeah, yeah,
activity.
that's for sure. Yeah, we everybody's into it. My wife, actually, Ingrid, my wife, she kind of got the whole ball rolling with the poodle pointer thing. We started out, her and I both. We had field bred golden retrievers for years, and she actually she got the first one, and then I kind of took the ball and ran with it from that. I hunted a lot as a kid behind labs and springers and whatnot. And when her and I started dating back in the late 90s, she had a field bred golden puppy that at the time, I didn't have a dog. And I was like, oh gosh, golden retriever, this thing's going to end up being 110 pounds in weight and all this. But she stayed about probably 48 pounds and pretty red. And she was a heck of a hunting dog. So I got to just use her a lot. And so Ingrid would go with, and she usually would walk around. And a lot of times, if a bird got up, I'd turn real quick and look, and Ingrid usually hit the deck, and I could go and try to shoot something. But yeah, we had those Goldens for quite a while, and then Ingrid is a veterinarian, and so along in her practice, she had come across a couple poodle pointers who belonged to customers and whatever, and she came and said, you got to check these dogs out. They're pretty cool, they're pretty neat and all that. And, and I said, yeah, sure, and at that point, I think we had two Goldens at the time, and we have a lot of hardwood floors and stuff through the house. So it was one of those things. Certain times of the year, no matter what, you'd open a door and you just have big red tumbleweeds all over the place and everything. And then she said, yeah, I don't think they're supposed to shed a whole lot either. And that was like, oh, it's not so bad. And then I talked to a few people, and just the talking to people about them and the athleticism and stuff of the dogs, and then plus the personalities and stuff was kind of like, yeah, I probably ought to check these out. So I did. I went and met a couple that she knew and everything else. And holy cow, they were pretty cool dogs. They were, when we were outside watching them work, they were very, very focused and had a lot of purpose to them and everything else. And to the point of at times I would think, holy cow, they're like antisocial. Like they don't even want to. I try to go pet one, and they're like, but if they were working, they were like, I don't have time for that right now. And I'd think, oh, this dog doesn't want to be pet. It's, like I said, like antisocial. And then at the end of, a work session or something like that, we'd go back and we might sit on a tailgate and talk or whatever. Well, then all those things, tongues in my ear and they're climbing on your lap and everything else. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a different deal there. So they definitely had the switch of when they're working, and when they're not, they're your best buddy. So yeah, so we kind of started looking into them, and I kind of do a lot of research when I'm going to get into something. Ingrid would tell you I'm not I don't kind of go in halfway. I kind of get on at that time, get on the horn, get on the phone, and made a lot of phone calls, talked to a lot of people, got as much information as I could, and everything else. And next thing you know, we're thinking we probably need one, and ended up getting Gunner, our first poodle pointer. Checkmate's Full Bore is his name. That was in 2014. I think is when we got him. So, and then the rest is history from there. But my kids are very into it too. My daughter's she hunts with me all over the place. My son, he's not as much into the hunting thing, but he's definitely into the working side of it. And when I go out to run the dogs, he's usually out in front of me running along with them all the time. And I have to tell him to rein it in a little bit, because otherwise I have to explain to him that the dogs are always going to be out in front of him. So pretty soon there's him 100 yards ahead of me, and then there's the dogs 100 yards ahead of him to the truck, or something like that. So, but yeah, no, we're all pretty into it. That's for sure.
It's interesting you started with Goldens. I find I have gotten a chance to hunt with some really good
Yeah.
field Goldens,
Yeah.
and some not so good ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
But their personalities are all pretty similar, and Goldens and setters are pretty similar to poodle pointers, I
Yep.
think, in their
Yep.
personalities.
I
Friendly
would
to
agree.
everybody. They should be friendly to
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
funny now because I do when I get people that call and inquire about dogs, we talk about, and they might ask me, how did I start with them and things like that, and I do tell them that, and it sounds crazy to say, right? Because the golden retriever is the epitome of the family dog and everything else, and I do tell people that honestly, I do think that the poodle pointers, I'm not going to say they're a better family dog, but they're as good, and in some ways, I think maybe they are a little more, they're a little more attentive, I think, to their people. So, but I think you're right. I think they are very similar to where, they want to be your buddy and all that stuff. So,
So your first dog came from Checkmate. That's Bill Blackman,
yep,
right?
Buck. Yep.
I've never met Buck, but
Yeah.
good Lord,
Yeah.
he's been around a lot longer than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Well,
and he has to go back to the 90s.
yeah.
How'd you
Yeah. He
end up?
was
He's
one
in
of the,
South Dakota, if I'm not mistaken.
he
How'd
was,
you end up out there?
so yeah, he was kind of one of the originals, right? Like around, so one of the dogs, like I said, that my wife knew came from Buck. And that was one of the first dogs I
Hmm.
ever went and looked at here. And so the gal that owned that dog, um, and that was a dog that, again, the people that bought him, they kind of came across the poodle pointers, thought it was a cool dog and everything else. And they did a fair amount of hunting. And her son ran that dog in NA as a young dog. And I think he got a max score of 112 in his NA test and this and that, whatever. But I went and met him, like I said, and he was one of the dogs that I saw work out in the field and then come back in afterwards and just be a great, companion type dog and a good buddy. So like I said about the research part, so she told me about Buck, and I'm like, well, I'm going to call this guy. So I probably, I mean, man, for times there probably wasn't 2 or 3 days that I wasn't bugging him. I would come up with another question, or I'd hear something, or I'd see something, and I'd be like, hey, and I'd call him, and I could imagine him. He didn't have caller ID, I don't think, but if he did, I think he'd probably be rolling his eyes like, oh, here we go again. It's this guy. So, um, and I mean, it went from, and we talked a lot. I mean, we talked a lot about, a lot about dogs, and he could rattle off, a lot of old time breeding and stuff like that. And it was pretty cool. And it turned into gun conversations and side by sides and all that stuff. So really, really cool. But he was always my go-to guy that I could, if there's something came up and I wasn't sure, didn't know, I could always call him and ask him, and he would be happy to tell me about it and whatnot. So, kind of a funny story. I was working for Cabela's at the time, and he was telling me, he said, I'm not going to have any litters or anything like that. And I said, that's fine. I said, I'm not ready for a dog anyway. I'm just trying to do my due diligence and learn as much as I can. And I remember I was working and he called one night and I got a call on my cell phone. It was like I remember flip phone, everything else. And I was like, oh, I got to take this. So I went and he said, well, I had a guy that is in the military. He got sent overseas. So he said, he can't take the dog. I have one. And I'm like, oh man. And he said, well, I wasn't really ready for a dog, you know? And I'm like, man, I really, really, really appreciate it. But, you know, we're just not ready. And he's like, well, if you are, then I've got a male, and you can have him. You know, you can buy him. And I'm like, okay. Well, I called Ingrid, and I said, well, Buck's got a dog, and you know, I'm like, I'm trying to think of like how can I politely tell him I can't take the dog, you know? But I'm like, at that time, I mean, man, everybody was 2 years out, right? Like you were getting on a list, and you were waiting a long time to get a dog, and I'm like, well, here's one, and we wanted a female. He had a male. And I'm like, you know, and there was just a lot of things that came up. And every time I'd call him back, it was like, I would say, yeah, we hadn't really set any money aside, you know, to buy a dog at this time. So, and he told me what he wanted for it, and it was less than I thought. I'm like, oh, shoot. All right, let me call you back. So I told Ingrid, and she's like, well, that's not what I was expecting. I said, yeah, I know. And then there was just a couple things like that. And I kept calling him back. You know, I'm like, okay, that's my out. And then all of a sudden he would answer. And it was like, well, that didn't work. Now I can still do that. And so at the last one was, he said, but I'm going to Montana hunting. I think it was Montana. It was either Montana or the southern North Dakota. Going hunting this weekend, so I need the dog gone. And I'm like, and I need the dog picked up by then. And I said, well, I can't drive to South Dakota, you know, in the next couple of days to get this dog. And all of a sudden he's like, well, hang on a second. And he said, Jordan, his nephew who was there hunting, he said, where in Minnesota are you? You know, he said Elk River. And he said, well, where's that to Zimmerman? And he said, that's the next town over. And he said, well, my nephew can just bring the dog back. And I'm like, all right, fine, checks in the mail, you know. So we bought Gunner, and the rest is history.
I mean, that's really amazing. So I did some research. Gunner, he's out of Bob and Diane Marsh's dog,
Yeah,
Tuckazoe, the versatile
yeah,
champion dog.
yeah.
I never knew Buck ever bred to him.
Hmm.
And out of a East Coast dog from Canada, a Finn Renard
Yeah.
dog,
And Ion
with
Flirt.
both
Yeah,
both parents are versatile champions.
yeah,
Lexington Cedar was Lexington Brown and Donna Kenya, who
yeah,
actually some of my current stuff goes back on the mother line through her.
yeah.
Pretty interesting. Yeah.
And Flirt, his mom, I think, is still around. She was around as of last fall, and she's got to be 14 or 15 now. And yeah, she was. I hunted with her. I went back after we got Gunner. I went back and I'd go hunt with Buck, you know, once a year or twice a year, and got to hunt with her. And yeah, it was really pretty cool, pretty neat. She was a machine, you know.
Yeah, I bet. I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah,
Very cool. So you started off with Gunner, but he doesn't make your breeding program.
yeah.
So
No.
maybe we should talk about how did you decide to wrap your head into being a breeder? Because that's a big leap from being a poodle pointer owner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, so I actually, so I trained horses for about 25 years. That's what I did for a career. And I did a fair amount of breeding, American saddlebred show horses. And so when I was doing that, I was very into pedigree research, you know, studying horse pedigrees and stuff. And I kind of nerd out on that, you know, a little bit, and trying to figure out, you know, crossing what with what, it's going to get you what, and whatever. So then when I got out of the horse business, it just got to doing it for that long. I say it took me a lot longer to get out of bed at the end of it than it did at the beginning, and I got a lot more hardware in me now than when I started training horses. So, um, but I had said, you know, now that I had all that time that I used to study pedigrees, and I don't do horses anymore, now what am I going to do with that? So then all of a sudden that kind of morphed into, well, dog pedigrees are pretty accessible, and I can start doing that stuff. So I kind of dove into that a little bit. Um, and so that was pretty neat. I at that time I still wasn't thinking about necessarily being a breeder, but coming from Goldens to poodle pointers, I really didn't know much about versatile dogs. You know, I mean, I knew what they were and I knew they could do a lot of things and stuff, but I didn't know the whole pointing thing and everything else. So I kind of looked up our local NAPPA chapter, and everybody seemed to think that that was kind of the way to get in and learn about learn about, the dogs and the breeds and all the different versatile dogs and everything. So I joined our local chapter, and I actually joined a training group right off the bat, which was awesome because it was funny because I was talking to a couple older guys that were in it, and they're like, "Yeah, you can come out on Tuesday mornings and meet us at 6 o'clock at Kelly Farm, and we'll do some training and things like that." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So I show up, and it's a lot of old timers, a lot of draughts, a lot of wire hairs. Bunch of short hairs, stuff like that, and I didn't bring Gunner with me for a while. But these were not like your natural ability learning how to do your versatile dog thing. These were all guys that ran utility, had some VCs, stuff like that. So I went from, my flushing dogs to all of a sudden seeing some versatile champions thinking, wow, this is what they all do, and everything. So it was a big, there was a lot to take in there,
Right out
and
of the box, they do it.
yeah, right. And I remember the first. It was very funny because I remember walking along with Mark Jacobs, who ran that training group, and I remember they had some birds out in launchers, and yeah, I was walking along with him and another guy who owned this wire hair that he was running, and that dog was getting out there, and those guys are just BSing. Mark's got a gun broken over his shoulder, and they're just walking down the trail, and I'm watching. I'm all jacked up, and this dog gets out probably, I don't know, 150 yards, whatever, and all of a sudden she circles back and slams on point, and I just start freaking out. I'm like, she's on point. We got to go. Let's go. And they're looking at me like, hang on, and I'm like, she's on, there's a bird, and they're like, we're well aware, and I'm like, and finally I just am quiet and I'm walking behind them and we walk the whole way. The dog never moves. They're still just BSing about something totally off the wall, not dog related even. And they get up there and pop the bird out and shoot it, and dog goes, gets it, brings it back. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? This was pretty unbelievable. So anyway, sorry, get a little off topic there, but
Good story. That's a good
um,
story.
yeah, it was very, very cool. So that was kind of it for me. I'm thinking, I don't have to like get my track shoes on and try to catch up to this thing while it's pointing a bird. And so I'm starting to go, yeah, this doesn't suck. This is kind of a cool thing. So anyway, I got really involved in NAPPA at that time and volunteered for as many tests as I could and stuff like that. So I would be at a test and somebody would show up and of course if I saw him get out of the truck with a brown bearded dog, I'm over there, like, hey, who's your dog? Who's your dog by? Where'd you get it? What do you do? And a lot of people would get out and they would have, they might get out and the dog's got an e-collar on or has a check cord on and stuff. And I'd be like, hey, just so you can't have anything like that at the test and whatever. So they would tell me that, yeah, my breeder really wanted me to run the dog and this and that. And I kind of started to figure out that they didn't really have an idea of what the test was all about. They just knew that they needed to test their dog. So I can remember one guy in particular where he came by and he was like, okay, and the field didn't go so great. This is a guy who had the e-collar to start with, had to take everything off. And now he's like, holy cow, how am I going to get my dog to come back? And it's like, well, good luck. And I remember him coming by and going, okay, now we're going to the track. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, what's a track? And I'm like, all right. So I'm thinking, and I remember calling Jason Mix after this test, and I said, it was kind of frustrating where to me it was like somebody, a guy gets a dog, loves the dog, everything else, and needs to go run it in a natural ability test, and then but they don't, the outcome that they were looking for maybe didn't happen just because they weren't aware, of what was going on and what the test was all about and everything else. And I felt like, man, if somebody's requiring somebody to test a dog or, really encouraging them to, um, I think, the people ought to have some help and direction if they wanted on how to do that. And I remember, like I said, going off because that guy, like I said, that particular gentleman was, he's pretty upset with his dog because he didn't do as well as he would. And then, of course, he's talking about how stupid NAPPA is and, all this stuff and whatever. And I'm like, well, that's not really the case. It was just frustration. And believe me, I know how that goes. So I remember talking to Jason Mix about it. And I remember he said, he's like, well, why don't you maybe, you know enough about dogs, enough about the pedigree. He's like, you call me and bug me with pedigree stuff for hours. Maybe you should, look at maybe giving somebody another option. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I kind of blew it off, and then actually we hung up, and then that kind of sunk in. I'm like, yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea. And then again, I'm very spoiled, and I know 100%. I know how spoiled I am. The fact that my wife is a veterinarian, so uh, a lot of that stuff, I'm pretty very fortunate that I usually spend the time on the phone with people and kind of vetting people and talking about dogs and things like that, and then looking at other dogs. And I tell her, I'm like, well, I'm thinking about breeding to so and so or whatever. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, I probably ought to go see him hunt. So then Ivy and I, my daughter, will get in the truck and drive to Illinois maybe and watch a dog hunt for a weekend, so we can check him out, see if we should breed to him. And then, so I spend the time kind of doing that stuff. And then when it comes to whelping time and everything else, then Ingrid, she kind of takes the reins and does all that stuff, which is awesome because I sure couldn't do it all. That's for sure, and she's very good at it. So that worked
Nice
out
to
pretty
have
well.
help.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My
So
daughter
we
helps me on that end. That
perfect.
she's a big help on that front.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can get some sleep
absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a lot of pictures, screenshots from the cameras in the whelping room, of either Ingrid or Miles or Ivy, in the whelping box. Either Miles might be on his phone playing, but he's got puppies crawling all over him, or Ingrid's doing something or whatever. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm in bed looking at the camera, so I'm pretty lucky. I 100% wear that. So. So
So
that's kind of sorry, long story, but that's kind of how it got
good story.
started. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's in your breeding program now? What dogs are you actively? Because Gunner isn't retired. He's got to be more or less retired.
He is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I still hunt him. I'll hunt him on rough grouse and woodcock and stuff here now. Just because, the open woods and stuff, he can get through there pretty well. He's a big dog. I mean, he's pushing 80 pounds.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, he's big. He hunted hard as a young dog, but he still was a lot of dog to push through heavy cover stuff. So, he'd get pretty tired. But man, I'll tell you what, talk about a meat dog. He's one that I never went further than NA with him, only because I didn't think he was probably the dog all that great, you know. Um, and maybe it's just because I wasn't a good enough trainer to figure out how to get him there and how to get that stuff to work out for him. But as far as getting out and finding birds and pointing birds and retrieving birds and stuff, he doesn't miss them. He gets them all, and he's really, really, really cool that way. But yeah, so now I do still hunt him on, like I said, rough grouse and woodcock and stuff. I actually had Lee Branch from Safari South came last fall to our cabin in Wisconsin and hunted, and he got to hunt with Gunner one day, and we got a lot of birds that day, so that was pretty
That guy
cool.
is a character.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't wait to do
absolutely,
this with him. He is. I love Lee.
absolutely,
He's a
yeah, yeah.
riot.
He's pretty funny. Yeah, he actually texted me this morning. It's pretty comical. So, um,
Anything there is to have done in this world
oh
with a
my
gun
gosh.
or a fishing pole. He has done
Yeah,
it.
no, this
Yeah.
this interview could go really, really long if I got into some of the lead
Yeah.
stories. I remember. I'll make this one quick, but we had 4 days, I think, planned at the cabin to grouse hunt, and my neighbor at the cabin is he's very Lee-like, where the guy's done everything, been anywhere, everything like that. So the first day we were going to hunt, I said, "Well, let's stop up. I'll introduce you to Bruce, and you guys can meet each other and whatever." We honestly I don't think we left till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had to go to a spot that was 10 minutes away. And we saw one bird because Lee and Bruce spent the whole day sharing stories about, wherever they'd been, cross country skiing across, frozen lakes in Russia and all this stuff and everything
Yeah.
else. And I'm like, we're not hunting today. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I got to remember where I was now with that.
That's all right. So I mean, what's your breeding program look like now?
Yeah, yeah. So we've got a male. We call him Sid, Flatlander. Um,
You just froze on my end anyway. Flatlander Chicago
oh,
Bandit, I think is what you were going
yep,
to say or what you did
yep,
say.
yeah, and that's Sid. That's our male um, that we got from Pete Hornstein from Flatlander Kennels out in Illinois. That was a dog that I had seen kind of a. I got another kind of a neat story, but anyway, I'd seen a lot about Pete's dog, Cash, Rip Snorter's Fast Cash online, hunting a lot and everything. And I really kind of liked his look and I liked a lot of things about him. So here's where I told Ivy, I said, we should probably go see that dog. And we drove out to Pete's and hunted with him and Cash. And then he had a dog, Sky was a female that he'd had a litter out of already. That was a very nice litter. And then he had a dog, Cedarwood's Marley's Mystique, who's by Czar. And and she hadn't had a litter yet, but watching those dogs hunt, she was a really cool dog. She was just 2 years old. And so Sky, I think, was either pregnant or being bred. And Pete said, "Yeah, you can kind of, I'll get you a really nice dog out of that litter." And then, but the more I watched Marley, that Cedarwoods dog, I was like, I want one out of her. And he's like, "Well, I don't even know if she's going to be breedable." Or I said, "I'm fine. I'll wait." And so I waited, and I'm glad I did. So we got Sid out of that one,
So can I
and
take a short detour? So
yeah,
what was Marley like? I own Marley's litter mate.
that's right. Actually, we've talked about that.
Did we?
Yeah,
I don't remember. So that
yeah,
was my
yeah, we
dog
did a long
Gypsy.
time
Yeah.
ago. Actually, I think I posted something online and you commented that it was years ago. Marley was cool. She was a dog that you could tell she was learning. She was kind of learning what she was doing, but she really had a really neat kind of a personality. She was just a friendly dog, but not overly friendly, just kind of a professional friendly, kind of thing. But hunting wise, she was very focused on what she was doing. And I can remember I still got a video of Pete knocking down a rooster way out in a drainage ditch. And yes, but that was it, and she did well there, but not a dog that had a ton of training, but a ton of retrieve. Like she went down, grabbed the bird, came up this tall hill, everything else, carried and delivered to hand this bird. And she didn't do it because she was trained to do it. She just did it because that's what she did, you know? And then she just, as soon as Pete grabbed the bird, she just went off and found another one, and went to find another one and all that stuff. So she was just a really neat dog, I thought.
Yeah, I know
Um,
Bob thought a lot of that. Bob Ferris thought a lot of that
yeah.
litter.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think he repeated it.
Hmm.
That's a whole other story on my side of that
Yeah.
thing. But that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's good to hear. No, it's good to hear.
Yeah.
'Cause a lot
Yeah.
of these dogs just disappear. You never know. Like, what was that dog
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, yeah. No, she was really, really neat. I liked her a lot. And then, like I said, Cash, Pete's male, he was very cool. That dog was something else to watch too. Hard, hard, hard worker. Really hard working dog. So, liked him as well. So we got Sid. There we drove out once that litter was born, and we picked him up and got him home. And I mean, right off, I've got videos and stuff of that dog at 10 weeks old. Retrieving dead chuckers just on a line, all the time, and he just was very, very easy dog to train. Like makes me look way better than I am. I he just it's like he'd do something once and he got it, and he'd understand. And it's like, and I would feel like there's got to be a ball to drop here. Like there's got to be something that is gonna just turn south and whatever. But knock on wood, it really, really didn't. I mean, he just kind of got good, So I ran him in UD, and he ended up at 200 prize two. He got a two in healing,
Oh,
four and everything
jeez.
else.
Oh
And
no.
and the funny
Oh
and
no.
the worst part about it is he healed. It wasn't that he didn't heal. It's because his handler gave him 5 commands before we got to the stakes. They had healing stakes at the time, and I remember my handling judge. It was kind of like the Charlie Brown teacher, right? Like he's talking to me like. now we're going to start judging as soon as you give your first command. And I'm just hearing wah, 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 wah. I had it in my head what I was going to do, and I totally blew off what he told me. And so I had it in my head that when I get to the healing stakes, I'm going to give him a command and we're going to go through and it'll be fine. So he said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yep, I'm ready." And so I made a big circle, and this whole circle, I just popped him on the leash and said, "Heal, heal, heal." And then I got to the healing stakes and I popped him one more time and said, "Heal," and went through. And he was fine. I mean, he healed. There was one point where he got a little bit ahead of me, but that was it. He healed all the way to the blind and everything was fine. No big deal. He did
There's a
not
lot of
not
stories about handler nerves screwing up customers.
absolutely.
A good
And
friend of mine is a judge, and her first utility test, her dog retrieved perfectly fine, and
hmm
she was so wound up she never knew, like, she's given the dog 5 or 6 fetch
yeah,
commands.
yeah,
She doesn't
yeah,
understand she's doing it. And I remember the
yeah.
last time the judge explains, "Listen, we really need a good fetch
hmm
here, so be
hmm
careful." And I remember, I'm the gunner. I walked up and said,
Yeah,
"Be careful."
yeah, yeah.
And she did it again.
I just had the same exact thing happen in a UKC. I ran sit in a UKC test a couple weeks back just for something to do. And it was very funny because same exact thing. He's on point. We go up and I'm trying to remember. It was second bird. So I think I did give him a whoa where you can do that, but once, not more than once. So I gave him a pretty good whoa and he stopped, locked up, everything was fine. And I walked past him to flush the bird out. And as I walked past him, I just went, whoa, like that. Not even think, it was just a thing. And he was perfect. He was steady through everything and all was good and retrieved the bird to hand. And I went to hand it to the judge and I'm thinking, oh, that was a great retrieve and everything else. And he's like, that was really good. And I'm like, thanks. He's like, go ahead and leash your dog. And I'm like, what? And he's like, do you even know you said whoa that second time? And I'm like, I know now. I remember now, but at the time, no, I didn't realize I said that. So, yeah, it can definitely happen. That's for sure. So, yeah, so that was Sid. So now he's been a pretty busy guy the last couple of years. He's doing a fair amount of breeding. He's doing great. I think we do really, now I do emphasize with my customers too that I do like them to run their natural ability test at least and maybe go on and stuff. And I think he's had 15 dogs run NA in the last 2 years, and he has 11 prize ones. So
Nice.
doing well. Yeah, yeah, he's producing,
Nice.
and that's four different females. So that was pretty neat. He's producing pretty well. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah, very cool.
And then I can keep going down the list if you want. If you
So,
want,
so how many females do you have that you're currently breeding?
one, two, three. We have three that we're breeding now. We have a dog named Little Egypt's Eye Candy, Lindy. We have Falling Feathers Bit Outside, who's Vaughn, who's out of Kirk Grounds with VC female Judy.
That dog's also out of Cedar Woods Cowboy Oakley, right?
Cowboy Ugly. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a very nice
Exactly.
litter. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I have Little Egypt's Gray Phase, who I actually just bred to Cedar Woods Cowboy Oakley because of Vaughn, and because of AJ. AJ is a pretty good guy to know. And
I tried to breed the case one time and it didn't work, but my thoughts on it were AJ is a great guy.
he is awesome.
He's salt of the earth guy, and I love that whole litter of dogs is fantastic. His is just
Yeah,
the
I'll
one that
tell you
gets
what,
used.
I'm getting some feedback on these right now that is the off. I mean, they're doing very, very, very well, and that one's a I have a lot. It's funny. I'm thinking now we need a part two and part three, but I'm going to go so long on these things. But that case litter that I had was a funny deal. We shipped semen, frozen semen from Case, um, and for Lucy, and the container failed. So when we got here, we opened it up and it was all dead. And called AJ, and it was like, oh man. And like you said, AJ's a great guy, right? And so he said, I'll do whatever you need to do. And he had no more. We couldn't get another shipment, and she's ready to go. So we ended up, AJ and myself and Ingrid, we met at a hotel in Kansas City at about 10 o'clock at night. We drove halfway and he drove halfway. So he drove down from Texas. We drove up from Minnesota, met in Kansas City, found an abandoned parking lot, and had a tie about 10:30, and got up the next morning and did the same thing. And I think we had 9 puppies a couple months later.
Great
So
story. And
Yeah,
he's not doing that for the money either. He's doing that for the breed. So that's a great
absolutely.
story. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, AJ is the real deal. So, and like I said, those pups are doing awesome. And so we actually kept one out of that litter who I have homed with a friend of mine who's a professional lab trainer who's had poodle pointer and short hairs along the way too. So he's got one of those, and then we have a dog that we got from just got from Ryan Bird from Brookside.
Which
Um,
litter?
it was the Aaliyah, and then Mark's
Cedar?
male. Yep, Cedar.
I
Yep.
was just down at Ryan's place. I
Oh
put
yeah,
him in touch with a very good friend of mine who bought one
yeah,
of those dogs. Yeah.
yeah,
Phenomenal litter. Yeah.
yeah. And I've got a guy that I've been training with for about 3 years, and a young guy, late 20s, but he's the kind of guy that he's like a just as he's like a 6'4". He's the kind of guy that late season when we get to a slough, I look at him and he's like, "Well, I'm going to go right through the middle." I'm like, "Heck yeah, you are." I'm
Oh, you froze. Let's
out,
see.
and whatever. But he's the right kind of guy to do that with. And I've been trying to get him a dog because he's the kind of guy you want to, home like me. I want to home a dog with him, or I'd like to sell him a dog because he's that dog is going to starting in September is going to hunt through January every weekend somewhere, some sort of whether it's waterfowl or upland birds or whatever, and it's gonna track some deer along the way too, and at the time he just wasn't ready, and when I first mentioned it a few years back, and he called me last year at one point, said, "I think I'm ready," and I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'm gonna find you a dog." So he got that dog from Ryan, and I'll tell you, I mean, even it's so crazy because even now, I mean, he just sent me something the other day, and this puppy's what, I think she's maybe 11 weeks old or 12 weeks old, and she's out there swimming like a fish and retrieving and stuff like that. And he's like so matter of fact about it, and I'm like, they're not all like that. I mean, they're, they're good, but she's pretty cool. Going to be a pretty cool dog. Pretty excited about that. So
Yeah, that's a top flight. That's a top flight prospect.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so very very excited.
So do
So
you have
yeah,
any
so
more
that's
litters coming this year?
not this year. No, this year we're looking to next year now. We had the two litters we had, the one out of Vaughn and the one out of Lucy, were pretty much back to back. I think we had 1 week in between, and
That's nice. When that happens,
yeah,
that's nice. Yeah.
yeah, it was good. It was good, but it was a lot. So
Yep, I did that
uh,
one year. Yep.
yeah, so I think it's kind of, and we had, and they're both pretty good sized litters. Both one was 9 and one was 8. So um, it was a lot, So we're ready to kind of back up a little bit and clean up the whelping room and let it sit clean for a little while and everything that way. But now I'm starting in the last few days starting to figure out, okay, what are we doing next spring? We're breeding to who, and what am I going to start looking at? So, although like I said, I got a text from Lee, right? About the litter he's got on the ground right now. And and my brain starts going, and Ingrid's like, just go down. so, so yeah, yeah, but it's fun.
Very, very good. So I imagine people could contact you and get on your list for next year if they're interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, we do. Our website, I think it's just pointnorthgundogs.com. And we do have a puppy questionnaire on there. And I just encourage people to fill that out. And I try to get back to everybody in a timely fashion. Depends on the time of year. Sometimes, like I said, right in the middle of having two litters and stuff, I might have been a little slow on the uptake to get back to people. But I do generally get back there, and I tell people kind of it's funny, kind of like listening to Todd's deal. It's kind of the same thing. I tell people all the time, do not feel like, because my first conversations with people are usually pretty long. You can tell I can talk a little bit. So, but I tell people that, do not be afraid to call if you have a question, if something pops up, you forgot to ask something, you hear something and you want to get my take on it. I said, do not feel like you're bothering me. That's a big thing, right? Like they said with me and Buck, I always felt like, oh man, this guy's going to hang up on me or tell me to quit calling or whatever, or just not answer the phone or whatnot. But I'm like, just don't be afraid to call, call all the time. And obviously, I don't mind talking about dogs, so it's not a problem. So yeah,
Very
so they
good.
fill that out.
Very good. Yeah. Well, good luck with all that next year. I'm in the same process trying to figure out what in the world am I doing next year, and I'm
Yeah,
waiting for the testing season to wrap up before I finalize plans because
yeah, yeah.
the next great stud dog is right
Right.
around the corner, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got two from our B litter that are running utility this year. I think that very excited about, and hoping that that everything goes well there, and I may be able to just use one of those. And that's pretty exciting because they're very nice dogs. They're out of Lindy, who is by I-80's Deuces Wild and out of Brutish House Foxy Shelley. So she's the full sister to Winston, and
How old is she?
she's 4.
Oh, she's that young. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and we had one litter. We did have one litter out of her by Sid. I think that in that one, I think there was 6 pups ran NA and 5 prize ones out of that. So, and they were super nice dogs. So I'm trying to think what would I do with her. I should just, maybe let's do that again. I should. It would be kind of silly not to, but we'll see what happens.
Well,
So,
good luck. Good luck with all that.
yeah, thanks, thanks, thanks. Yeah.
I think a lot of us are in the same boat as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
what else do you want to tell the people?
Um, as far as as far as like I said, if anybody does have questions or anything like that and just wants to BS a little bit about dogs, like I say, anytime. If anyone has NABDA questions, we talked about that earlier too. You and I did a little bit. I am an NABDA judge as well. So if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to go on about that too.
Well, getting back to the alliance,
Yeah.
there's a few threads here. One, I mean, we thought enough of you to put you on the board,
Hmm.
being a level-headed judge,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's been wonderful. Been very good to work with.
Yeah, it's been good.
Um, the other side is, so you got one of Ryan's puppies.
Yep.
My buddy Jeff got one of Ryan's puppies. Jeff is a short hair breeder. I think he's got 6 versatile champions, and he always liked my dogs. He's my closest hunting buddy, so he wanted a really good one.
Yeah.
The only way Ryan sells dogs to people like you and him is through the alliance because it's a
Yeah.
cooperative thing.
Yep.
There's no way he'd sell a great prospect to a competitor
Yep.
otherwise.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. I remember, talking about the Alliance. I mean, I remember when I first kind of got started, again, like I said, Buck had a lot of good to say about the Alliance and everything too. And Buck and Bob know each other pretty well and all that stuff. And it's so funny, just a funny Bob story there was years ago, I was hunting in North Dakota, Hettinger, North Dakota, the south side. And it was a very small town. And I remember I went, there was like one gas station, right? So I went to the gas station at night and I remember pulling in and there was a truck with a dog box on it. It looked like it had some Chocolate Labs pictures, on it and everything else. And so I went inside and there was a young guy in there. And so I got talking to him and, obviously we are both hunting and we talked a little bit and this and that. And we walked outside and as we're walking out, he said, "What kind of dogs do you have?" And I said, "Poodle pointers." And he's like, "Oh." And he's like, "Well, chances are one of them's from this guy." And Bob came walking around the front of the truck, and I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" And I'm like, "I'm in Hettinger, North Dakota. There's no one here." And Bob's, cleaning the windshield on the truck or whatever. And it was his son was the guy in the gas station I was talking to. And so it was one of those deals. And I did the same thing with a horse trainer that I really admired when I was starting out and stuff. And I met him in Simpsonville, Kentucky. And I can remember meeting him at a tax store, just in the store. And it was one of those deals where I just looked at him, I'm like, "You know who you are, you know?" And it was kind of that same thing at that time with Bob. I'm like, "Are you serious? Like we're the only ones here, like anywhere?" And so we sat and talked for a while and all that, and it was really pretty cool. And it is very comical because there's a lot of times where I'd be driving in the truck and I would call, whether I was on the way to the cabin or something like that. And I could think, okay, I've got an hour and a half. So I'm safe. I'm safe. I can call Bob because I have an hour and a half before I get to the cabin. And there's multiple times I'd end up sitting in the Dollar General parking lot because I'm like, I'm too close to the cabin. We're still going to be on the phone for another half an hour, whatever. So a lot of great people in the alliance. I've met some awesome, and I have a lot of hunting buddies, right? Like we start in September too, and go through January. In the last few years, I've ended up in Oklahoma hunting with Jack Tracy and Isaiah Irby and a lot of the other Alliance guys. And it's just a great, it's really a cool thing. We don't always maybe you know, we may not always disagree or whatever, but we always have the same thought process and same direction, and that's very, very cool, as far as I'm concerned. And it's neat to be able to talk to somebody, and I always learn something. Every time I talk to one of those guys, at the end of it, I'm always, yep, I learned something from that conversation. So
Yeah, some of
so
those guys
it's
have been around for a while
yeah, right,
and
exactly.
yeah, have done some really good things. But
Yeah,
that's
it's pretty funny.
fantastic. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fantastic. We're spread out here on the East Coast a little bit. I would like to start doing a destination hunts with some people though.
absolutely,
Kind of get to know.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, man. It's I think last year, like I say, in Oklahoma, I can't remember exactly, but there was, I mean, I think we had probably four or five at least probably more than that, four or five alliance breeders, all hunting together, and that's pretty interesting at night. Jason will tell you all about liar's dice and all that. Although I did win the one time I played last year, but everybody knows about that game. So yeah, yeah, it's a great time, great group of people. So
And that's how you forge friendships. And that's how you get working relationships.
absolutely,
So, which is for me is the benefit of the alliance.
yep.
Really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. And the nice thing, like I said, one thing that we've kind of done is going through. I have my list of our dogs here, um, and the cool thing is except for Gunner was the first one, but after that, all of these dogs that we own, I've hunted with their parents or siblings or something like that, only because I've been in touch through people in the alliance. So been able to get out and see the dogs themselves and all that. So yeah.
That's useful. Test scores tell you a lot,
Hmm.
but they don't paint the full picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah. I
I
mean,
can I can tell you every one of my dogs where they ranked at everything.
yeah.
None of them are the same.
Yeah.
Some are better than others at everything.
Yeah. Well,
You
and
would
like I
know it
said,
by test scores.
even going back to Gunner, I think Gunner was a 98 prize three, maybe 98 or 93. I think he's 98 prize three, 100 years ago, and whatever. So he did fine. He didn't knock it out of the park. It wasn't a great thing or whatever. But I'll tell you what, man, that dog, you take him hunting, and you're never gonna you're gonna he's way better than a prize three dog in your eyes. You know what I mean? Like he's a hell of a hunting dog. So that's pretty cool. And that's another one that Jason gave me a hard time about that when Sid was a puppy and out blowing up birds at 400 yards and Gunner's pointing everything in between there and we're shooting them all. And I'm talking about how cool Sid is because he's just tearing it up and all this stuff. And he's like, he's blowing out birds at 400 freaking yards. I'm like, yeah, but did you see that one that he pointed when he kicked up the dirt and spun around so fast and all that stuff? And he's like, yeah, but Gunner got our limit. So, yeah, yeah, it's
That's part of
like
the
I said,
education process of a young dog, though.
absolutely,
You-
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
nowadays Sid points and holds and retrieves a lot of birds. He gets to get after it pretty good. So,
My best dog, Ozzy, on the state lands one day, he was 8 months old and he lost his mind on pheasants. I lost him,
mhm,
but I could tell where he
mhm.
was by pheasants flushing on
Yep,
the
that's
horizon.
exactly. Yep,
And they were at like 90
yep,
degree increments. Like the
yep.
amount of ground that little dog covered was crazy. And he turned
Yep.
into a real good one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like I said, when he was blowing those birds up, I didn't have to bother looking at the Garmin. I knew right which direction he was and about how far. So, yeah. Yeah. But he learned, that was his learning year.
Yeah.
After that year, we got to get to work on studying his training a little bit and stuff. And now
It
he's
goes
that.
back. It goes back to a lot of people. They show up at a NAPPA training day and they see one of our good dogs and like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
all like that, aren't they? And like, yeah, they can be.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
apply some rules to the game.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe not every day, you know, but yeah, nope, that's for sure.
Very cool. Well, I've enjoyed the chat. This was interesting.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's funny. Like I said, I feel like I could keep you on here for a long time thinking of things that with the dogs and stuff that have come on over the time. But it's cool to look back and think about it, and it's an interesting thing to be able to remember. Just about every bird and every situation, one way or the other.
Well, if you come out here in August,
Yeah.
we'll swap some stories
Yep,
off
absolutely. That's the
camera. Yeah.
plan. That's the plan. Ivy's pretty fired up and to go to school out there and like I said, well, I told her the other day, I said now we're going to start looking at, later into the fall visiting trips too, maybe I don't know, somewhere around duck season maybe or something, see how that goes.
Oh, I do a youth pheasant hunt every year, and I did it for November. I think it's 8th this year because duck season's closed at that point.
There
So,
you go. There you go. Absolutely. There's always
yeah,
a way to
we can
schedule.
definitely have some fun.
Absolutely. No, that would be very cool. That would be good.
Very good. All right. I
Cool.
appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. A lot of
All
fun.
right. Eric Borkowski, Point North Gundogs.
There you go.
Website, Facebook, and everything else. Easy to find.
Yep. We're kind of all over that
And
stuff. So,
and on the Alliance website. So,
yep. Absolutely.
very good.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Eric.
you, sir. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
See you.